Sometimes the effects of wounds don't heal. Recently, I've been embroiled in a public controversy having to do with trees, specifically the trees down Montrose Boulevard. There was some early misinformation that came out about the destruction of the trees. And so thousands of people signed a petition arguing for the preservation of the trees, which was a goal all along. I've learned a lot about trees, their root systems, what it takes to grow, how long they live, about carbon sequestration from trees, a lot about trees. Good Friday is a day about a tree. In Christian poetry and song, we will talk about the cross as the tree of glory, the tree of pain, the tree that connects heaven and earth. A glorious tree and an ignoble tree, a tree of irony and paradox. One of the fun facts that I learned about trees from my public controversy is that trees don't heal. They compartmentalize and continue to grow. So if you look at a tree that has had a big limb lopped off of it, it can look rotten and be rotten in one place. That place on the tree will never rejuvenate. Instead, the energy goes into the living parts that can continue to thrive. The scar of the wound of the tree stays with it its whole existence. When we think about the cross of Jesus and this tree, I'm reminded that this paradox of Christian faith, of death and resurrection, of sin and redemption, abide together as in the life of the tree. Today, we're mindful of the wounds of sin, the wounds in our hearts and in our lives and in our relationships and in our experiences. These wounds mark us. They shape us. They sculpt our worldview. Sometimes those wounds can take the form of rejection, when people we have loved and assumed loved us let us down. Sometimes those wounds take the form of greed or pride or misplaced values that we were late to come to the table to recognize. Sometimes those wounds mean complicity with structures and practices that oppressed other people and also distorted our own integrity and sense of self. Our wounds bleed. Our wounds are tender. Our wounds are seen and unseen. We also have a sense of collective wounds, wounds of a people. In the lesson from Isaiah today, in that suffering servant song, we hear it as Christians as individual wounds, but within a Jewish context, those wounds are collective. We feel the wounds. We as a people have the wounds. On this Good Friday, we're mindful of that, particularly as we think about the situation in Gaza and the fact that the hostages are still not released, the fact that our country and those around the world are feeling rift around the issues of the needs of the Palestinians and the very real existence of anti-Semitism in our world. Wounds can be collective. Good Friday is the church's attempt to capture the paradox of woundedness and healing. Jesus, in his flesh, confronts both a religious system and a political system that is self-serving and hypocritical. In that process, he takes upon the wounds of his culture and our wounds. John in his gospel has been consistent throughout that Jesus is really flesh. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, we sang at Christmas. And on this Good Friday, we know and we proclaim that in Jesus' flesh, he died, taking on our wounds. And those wounds, the mark of those wounds, never goes away in the Gospel of John and in our Christian story. The paradox is the Christ carries the wounds into the heart of God, completing God's empathy and connection with us. God takes on our wounds. God reaches into our brokenness to heal. The challenge of faith, of course, is that we don't get stuck in our woundedness, in our sin, in that way of seeing ourselves, but that we recognize that brokenness and, like the tree, compartmentalize it. We are not merely our wounds. We are not without them either. In our tradition, death, resurrection, and ascension is the refrain. Today we mark the wounds. Today we recognize with full throats and open eyes the pain, the suffering, and the marks. We await the healing.